Welcome to Gusto with Ashley Sterling.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Gusto with Ashley Sterling. My name is Ashley Sterling. This week I have an incredible guest. He is someone who truly has a unique journey, from project management to sales to co-founding his own company, the company Rememorate. That's Rememorate. Dan Lee is not only known for his very impressive mustache, it is impressive. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. But his knowledge and his charisma and his ability to adapt through a variety of careers, a variety of skills. He is one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, not kidding. And he has just such a unique perspective on life and on opportunities. So it is with a great honor that I introduce everyone to Dan Lee.
Oh, no, thanks. That's very nice of you.
Yeah. Also, what are you drinking? Are you drinking anything?
Yes, I have some Virginia bourbon.
Excellent. And where are you right now? You've been remote for a while, right?
Yeah, so I'm in the Southern Catskills. So it's Sullivan County, a little hamlet called Glen Spey in the town of Lumberland.
Excellent. And how long have you been there?
Well, I've had the little cabin up here for, I guess it's coming up on 3 years now. But I've been here pretty much full time since, I guess it was February. I went down to Houston to visit my little sister, and her husband thought he had strep throat, so I quarantined myself at the end of February, beginning of March, because I thought might have strep throat, and was fine there. And then it turned into pandemic, and I'm like, I guess I'm staying here.
Great. It worked out. I mean, I don't know. A cabin sounds pretty sweet right now, honestly. Living in the heart of a city it's not that fun anymore.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't have planned it any better.
Yeah.
Because it's really nice being able to have just space and outdoors and being able to go on hikes and drives and stuff like that.
Do you still have your truck?
Yep. She's running well. Good old Loretta. Yep.
So I would love for you to introduce yourself in true Dan fashion, and just kind of give the audience just a little bit of your history and kind of what your background is, and we can do deeper dives too.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Dan Lee. I'm the co-founder of Rememorate, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later on. But born and raised in Virginia, kind of been up and down the East Coast throughout my life and career. Undergraduate at RIT in upstate New York. Was down in North Carolina for a number of years, and then ultimately found myself up in New York City, and now further out in the Catskills. So my background's kind of the intersection of psychology and technology. So undergraduates in psychology, specifically neuroscience, kind of brain and behavior type stuff, and then worked a long time in the instructional technology field before it was everyone's day-to-day life. So I was doing online learning in the early 2000s with, you had to mail the CD-ROM to your house so that you could install your course management software and be able to participate in your course. So it's been kind of surreal seeing instructional technology and specifically online learning kind of coming into the everyday household now.
Yeah, you're probably one of the first people that when the pandemic started, I thought of, because of your skill set and your capabilities of just technology in general. So Like, what out of any of the things that have come out of the pandemic in terms of like technology advancement or career types, or even like the path that you're on right now with Rememorate, what's one of the things that like impressed you the most with how the world responded?
Uh,
It's kind of a big
I mean,
question.
honestly, the technology has been there for a while, right?
Yeah.
It's just there were social stigmas behind online learning or behind remote working, and so to me, that's the biggest leap that's happened is people took that leap of faith to be like, okay, you know what? Maybe we can still learn things online, and maybe people actually will still work if they are not in an office. So, and that's one of the things that we continually play with Rememorate, which the short introduction there is that it's an app that helps you remember people's names. So kind of like a visual contact management app that gives you different ways of association to be able to get back to the memory of when you met someone. So one of our biggest challenges, right, is that the biggest thing that has to happen for you to remember someone's name is that you have to make a conscious decision to say, I just met Ashley. She's wonderful. I want to remember her name. Like, I want to continue this conversation, or I want to send her something, or maybe there's an opportunity here. So you have to make a conscious decision that says, I want to remember her name. And so now I'm going to use this tool that makes it very easy for me to be able to do that. And so in many ways with remote work and with online learning, it's the same thing where everyone had to take that leap of faith to say, okay, I can still learn this way, or I can still work this way. And then the resounding answer to all of that is yes, right? This is a challenge. I don't know if it will work. And then you start to do it and you're like, oh, this
Sweet.
actually works.
Radical. This is great. Have you found, I mean, I would imagine that an app like that, like a company like that that's focused on remembering people, has become really useful when we're all wearing face masks. Have you guys found like a spike in usage with your app, and or had to make any modifications because of face masks or social distancing?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting time, especially with our combined background in kind of the event technology side of things, to see that just how some industries just disappeared overnight. Others are just business as usual, doing what you always did, and then everyone else kind of in the middle ground has had to adapt and do something different. So with us, so a big part of it being a technology company is that you're data driven, right? You make your decisions based on the data that you see. And so it was really interesting because looking at our downloads going into the pandemic, we had a huge spike at the end of like holiday party season, December last year, where people were like, oh man, I'm going to my holiday party. I'm never going to remember my like boss's wife's name or kid's name or
I mean, that's important.
whatever. So we saw a big spike there. We saw another one in February, honestly. So looking at the chart, we were going up. We had that kind of what you look for in a startup company, right? The hockey stick curve, where it's kind of slow, gradual growth, and then it starts to shoot up. And right as we were starting to shoot up, the pandemic hit, and then all of a sudden, no one was even talking to anyone. Everyone dug their bunkers and just kind of stayed there. So the interesting thing is that we didn't see a plummet in downloads. And so instead of going up and then going right back down to where we were, we had a slight decrease. And then over the past few months, and we kind of plateaued and just sort of stayed steady. And then it's been about 2 months now, we started to kind of kick up and trend back up, which is one of those weird, you get into this with political science where it's like, all right, what are these weird indicators that we can look at that things are starting to get better? And for us, it was our downloads report, where we're starting to see more people download the app, which means more people are interacting with people, which is hopefully a good sign for recovery. So we just broke the 10,000 download milestone on the App Store, which is, I think it's like 8% of all apps on the App Store hit that milestone. So it's a little bit of muted applause because it's still in the middle of a pandemic, but it's good that even though we slowed down a lot, and we're still making progress. So
yeah. So I mean, I feel like that's a good segue into your background in startups and technology, because I mean, you went to Rochester Institute for Technology, and then you kind of jumped into a couple of different variations of tech-based positions. So what was your journey into the world of startup, kind of before the world of startup really became the world of startup that it is today, and when it was maybe a little less sexy than it is now, or was, when we worked together, for example?
Yeah. I mean, so whenever I talk about my career trajectory or path or all of that, I jokingly say that I'm on my fourth career now, because I've never been a really deep specialist in anything, or really gone, and you share kind of this similar background of going broader instead of narrow in terms of career experience. So my first career out of college was at Fidelity Investments in their human resources and payroll outsourcing space. So
exciting.
I mean, in many ways it was. There are obviously plenty of stories that come out of that, but the big thing that got me was a lot of big time corporate experience, and I went through project management, professional training for the certification, and Six Sigma Green Belt certification, and all of these things that are like, from a career standpoint, you get one of those and then you're basically golden for your career, because you're like, well, yes, I am a PMP certified project manager, or I am a Six Sigma Green Belt process improvement professional. And I purposely went shy of completing the full certification thing, because I did not want to be a project management professional or a process improvement person. But I learned a ton along the way in terms of how you run and improve processes, and how you manage projects and people and all of that. So and that was at a pretty young age, in my early 20s, where I was managing a team of like 18 people, one of which was like literally twice my age and close to retirement, and another person that was that I was promoted over, that they thought they were going to get the position and didn't. So it was from a HR management perspective, it was kind of like a lightning education and learning all of that stuff. But if there's one thing I learned out of all that, is that it's not what I wanted to do my entire career. So I kind of went back to my educational roots into educational instructional technology at Duke University. I used to run their the online programs for Duke TIP, which is the talent identification program, which is gifted supplemental educational opportunities for gifted middle and high school students throughout the Southeast region. So we had probably 1,000 students in what was then called synchronous learning, which is when you're kind of face to face with the teacher, and then another 10,000 in asynchronous, which is, it's called learn on your own, or essentially the self-paced learning courses. So after being in the private corporation for a long time, learned what I wanted to, but was ready to get out, went back to the altruistic education. And then after about 5 years in that as well, I kind of came to the same realization, where in big organizations like that, whether it's a huge corporation or a huge university, I realized that I was spending 75% of my time justifying that we should do a thing.
Yeah.
To say, here's a project, we will reach this many more students, or we will save this many dollars every time we run payroll. and then 25% of the time actually doing the thing
Yeah.
that everyone knew was a good idea to begin with, but we had to justify whether it's your corporate expenditure and your budget, or whether it's a nonprofit and you're dealing with donations and your budget comes from different areas. So that's ultimately what lured me to the startup world. Is I wanted to flip that ratio. I wanted to spend 25% of my time doing the research and being like, is this a good idea? Okay, it seems like it's a good idea. And then 75% of the time being like, all right, let's do it. Let's build this thing. Let's make this thing. Let's try this thing.
Yeah.
And if it didn't work, oh, well, it didn't work. And if it did work, then great. What's the next thing to throw at us? So that's ultimately what led me to the startup world, and met the breakfast Luster guys. I actually did my interview with them remotely over a Skype session instead of in person. So another weird little instructional technology thing that was well before its time. But at that time, it was only 4 people at the entire company, so fit was pretty important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, work there is essentially a founding employee for basically another 5 years there, and that ultimately led me to founding and starting my own company.
Hell yes. I mean, I love that entire story, because that's exactly what this podcast is about. It's just, you don't have to follow one exact road. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be that you go in, you're a project manager, and you're a project manager until you're not a project manager anymore. It can be, I took this course and now I know a lot of stuff. I want to take this to a different area of expertise. I want to join a startup in New York City. I want to make my own company come to life. So, I mean, with all of that, what would you say, like, when you were younger, that kind of defined your path in this? Like, were you similar in your thinking when you were like younger, in middle school, high school, where you're like, I love learning about a lot of things? I mean, you're like an encyclopedia. I remember we were out probably at a bar in downtown Manhattan, and I jokingly asked you about a building, and you went on like this full history of the building, and I was like, oh, I was joking. but, but it stuck with me because it just shows like how knowledgeable you are and how much you love to learn about a huge variation of topics: history, technology, psychology. So were you the same way, maybe with a slightly smaller mustache when you were a kid, or was there something that maybe inspired you to learn as much as you could?
Yeah. So if there's one thing that drives me, or that is my one true passion, it is to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what has led me to doing lots of different things, as opposed to being that hyper focused, I'm going to get my PhD in this, or I'm going to become the best person in the world in that. I absolutely respect people that choose to go that route, because that's where you really make breakthroughs and innovations, is by going super deep in one particular field. But I've always been more interested in just learning a little bit of everything, and instead of making a groundbreaking discovery that changes humanity forever, I'm more interested in like being the most uniquely suited to almost any situation that gets thrown in front of me, to know that I can figure it out, or come up with the solution, even if it's not necessarily going to be the best solution, to be able to just kind of figure it out. So, and I was in no way the best student, because that's that same kind of ADD. Like, this is cool. I want to learn about this. Okay, I'm going to go and learn about this other thing. I'm going to go and do this thing next. Does not structure. In my math teacher hated me. I could do the math. It was fine. But I would always challenge myself to fit all of my math homework on the front page of a single notebook sheet of paper. So my math teacher in elementary school said that I was the reason that she had to get glasses, because I would
Oh,
write this like tiny font to be able to fit all of the math into one page. So I mean, my biggest kind of, I guess, learning inspiration on that front. So I have an interesting family where my mother is the most educated person in her family, and my father is the least educated person in his family. With some college but no degree. My mom has her PhD. She went back and got it. She started to go to college when I was in kindergarten, and so we graduated about the same time when I graduated with a bachelor's, but she was graduating with her PhD.
amazing.
And of course managed to get straight A's throughout, which I could never do, nor would I want to do.
No.
But my father has had throughout the course of his life probably, I think he actually wrote them down, and it was something like 40 different jobs and careers, to the point that my little sister had a game that was basically like, what job has my father not done before? And so she would pick some kind of job or thing and be like, firefighter, and be like, well, I was on the volunteer firefighter squad in Fairfax County for this number of years, and
Check.
yep. So whatever idea she came up with, he would always say, yeah, well, I did that for this amount of time or that amount of time. But there was one time that she was absolutely convinced she had him stumped. And so my little sister, in her, I don't remember her age, probably her late teens, finally went up to my father and was like, I got it. Have you ever been a nude model?
Yes.
And he stops and goes, well, when I was living in DC, I was hired by the university for their art classes where they needed a male nude model. So they paid me good money to just sit there for an hour. It was great. The sky's the limit.
Yeah.
And a lot of those stories have been verified by third parties. So she's tried to do that too, in terms of calling them out on specific things. And it'll be like, oh yeah, ask this person about it. And
amazing.
they'll be like, oh yeah, that we remember that.
So do you think that your parents are like a perfect example of what inspires you to kind of explore all things, but be really good at everything that you do? I mean, you have like the balance of your mom getting her PhD, going to school, and then you have your dad who has done everything, including nude modeling. Would you say that you're like maybe a perfect combination of the two in that regard?
Well, I mean, it's and I've been very, very blessed with just by having two parents that have been around and mm-hmm. together and a part of my life. So that it's a huge advantage for any child to be able to have two parents that you can kind of look up to as role models.
Absolutely.
So if anything, the message that comes out of that is that anything is possible. You just have to choose what you want to do and figure it out. But mm-hmm. In many ways, that's one of the most difficult decisions you can possibly make, is when you have all of these different opportunities to be like, okay, so I could go get my PhD, or I could become a firefighter, caver, nude model, graphic designer.
I mean, both sound fun.
So yeah, at the end of the day, you just got to see where life takes you, right?
Yeah.
What opportunities are presented? Who do you meet? I mean, that's a big part of what we stand for at Rememorate. Is
exactly.
I ultimately met my business partner on a plane, where it was during all of the travel for events, and we sat next to each other. We both happened to be upgraded to first class. We're sitting at the front of the plane, and I used to be traveling 70,000 miles a year. So plane time was my happy alone time, where I had no other obligations. Like, I was unplugged, didn't have to do anything, could just chill out and read or just zone out or whatever. But we struck up a conversation and kind of talked about the shared struggle of remembering names and ultimately decided to do something about it.
And you started that company in 2018, right?
Yeah, 2018 sounds about right.
So
on one hand, it feels like forever ago, but on the other hand, that was only a few years ago. So
I mean,
that's another thing that the startup world does to you. You lose all concept of time because everything's changing.
I hardly remember last week, and it was Thanksgiving. So I mean, it is what it is, right? So like with Rememorate, what would you say? So looking back, like it's obvious that your parents were a pretty big inspiration for you, and you allowed yourself to explore to the best of, or just for what Dan wanted to do, right? So with Rememorate, do you find that the company itself, the app, the startup environment that you're in, specifically remote, does that inspire you today? Like, where do you pull your inspiration from for Rememorate, for hobbies like fixing up your cars, etc.?
Well, I mean, Rememorate is difficult because the big inspiration for that was all of the travel and all of the events, and all of that has kind of stopped. So from that standpoint, it's been weird.
Yeah.
The good thing is that we've always been a remote distributed team.
Mm-hmm.
So from how our company operates, it's business as usual this year versus last year.
Yeah.
The difference is we don't get the field testing the way we used to go out to an event and talk to people and use it and introduce people to it and then get their blunt, honest feedback to be like, oh, that's great. Or why do you have to do this? And you can't do this thing. What's with that? So that was a big, from a product management standpoint, that was a lot of what we did to learn early on, was just stress test it by going out to events and meeting people. So that's been very weird and different. But we have it's honestly worked out pretty well because we were in a kind of startup challenge with a company called Blackbaud, which is they're probably the biggest software company that you've never heard of because they're specifically focused on the social good space. So they work with nonprofit organizations, with charities, with universities, with churches and faith organizations. As instead of a CRM, they are kind of like a donor management system. So if you've graduated from a college and they reach out to you to be like, hey, you graduated, how about you start to donate now that you're making money? Or the bigger foundations that are raising money, doing big galas and things like that, all of their donors are managed on Blackbaud's platform. So we were one of 14 companies in the inaugural cohort of the Social Good Startup Challenge that allowed us to integrate with Blackbaud software, as well as be introduced to different people within the company that are experts in the space. So
yeah, amazing.
It was all that started before the pandemic, but became critically important to us throughout it, because that nonprofits and charities are more important now than they were ever, and they have to pivot a little bit and figure out how to better raise money if it's not your traditional race or gala or whatever that may be. But as a fundraising development professional, you have to remember the names and faces and details of hundreds of people. So one of the things that I've been told about a few times is referencing our app to the scene in the Devil Wears Prada, where there's like a charity gala at the end of the movie, and there are the two assistants that sort of go back and forth, where the main character confidently greets everyone at the gala by first name, knows all of the details, but that's because she has one or two extremely knowledgeable, on top of their game assistants that are there with all of the details. So from a Blackbaud standpoint, we're kind of filling in that niche of being the pocket assistant so that you have all of the details and all the information you need about the people that are either attending an event in person or virtually. Just extremely easy to get to and accessible instead of logging into your computer and being able to get in and see all of those details. So that's really been our big focus for the past few months, is just kind of building all of that out, and just helping organizations that are helping people.
That's awesome. So a lot of the listeners of this podcast are very new to networking. I learned or most of, I would say, my networking skills from just watching you at events, and just how you would engage with people who were, that you were face to face with, or even from a sales perspective. So if you were to say anything to maybe a younger version of you, or to a listener that is not as comfortable with networking or not as comfortable with sales, maybe just talking to people in general, what advice would you give them, if any, or yourself?
So some of the biggest opportunities and experiences that you come across in your life are times that you are terrified and feel uncomfortable and just want to turn around and go home. And events and networking are kind of a microcosm of that, where you show up to the event, you're like, oh, this is cool. Well, I'm going to grab a shrimp and I'm going to grab a beer, and cool, I have my free drink and my free shrimp. I kind of want to go home now. But you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone to say, all right, everyone that's here is in the same boat. They're at a networking event. Maybe they have a few more people in their circle that are with them, or maybe they have someone that they're there kind of being their wing person to get through the situation, or whatever that is. But you got to take that leap and make the introduction. There are plenty of small talk tactics that are out there that can start off that conversation. But the biggest thing is to engage, to actually step up to someone, say hello, introduce yourself. They will reciprocate. And again, back to the behavior change, people want to be remembered, right?
Right.
When you start a conversation, your mind's going 50 different places, trying to play chess and be like, all right, well, if she says this, I'm going to say that. Or if he says this, then I'll respond with that, and I'll talk about that. And then you realize in just a few cycles later that, oh, you totally forgot their name already. So just kind of start off slow, take it natural, introduce yourself, get their name. There are a bunch of different strategies that you can use, saying their name back, saying it and repeating it a few times in the first few sentences. And then if after those first few sentences, it seems like a meaningful, because there are plenty of networking conversations where you talk to someone and you're like, oh, you are a real estate tax attorney and have nothing to do with me.
And
so it's okay to be like, well, it was great meeting you. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and just move on and start another conversation. But there might be another thing where you're like, oh, you're a venture capital investor and I'm starting to raise a round, and okay, you're probably going to be important, so I should remember your name and get your information. It's okay to take an action, to write it down, to store it in an app, or to say, like, can I have your card, or to be able to give a card. All of those things. People want to be remembered. And one of the great things about remembering names is that you get really excited when you remember someone's name, and you're like, I got it. That's Ashley. I got it. I don't even have anything to say to her, and I'm just going to go up and say, hello, Ashley, because I remember her name.
And I'm going to be like,
and then it goes the other way around, right? Where people are like, oh, like, I don't remember that weird guy with the mustache at all, but that's cool. I guess I must have been important, or
Dan, I'm pretty sure you'd be hard to forget.
Yep. Yeah. So the long and the short of it there, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be difficult, but take the leap. You'll feel better once you get in the conversation. If it's awkward and terrible, just move on to the next one, and you will have already forgotten about it at the next one. And then take an action, get some information, because there's so many. We meet upwards of on average 8,000 people throughout our lives. We can only remember 150 names and faces at a time. So that's a big gap in the number of people that we meet and have a meaningful interaction with compared to the ones that we remember. So if you don't get a card or add them to an app or take an action, it's going to be gone into the ether, and that is it's nothing.
Right.
Whereas if you take an action, you look for them on LinkedIn and add them, or you get their business card or whatever, just to be able to, because you never know if there's going to be some kind of opportunity or connection that happens where they're like, oh yeah, I am a real estate tax attorney, but I'm really looking for a killer executive assistant. And then you realize that, oh, your nephew is like looking for a job and wants to be an executive assistant. And you'd be like, I met this guy at this thing, and maybe if I ask Joe, he'll remember, or Lisa's good with people. If you don't get that information and take that step, then it's a lost contact versus infinite potential for opportunity.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like Rememorate would be just a really easy way once we do get back into events, or even just a pretty easy way to just store new contacts through LinkedIn or through, I don't know, meeting in the elevator going up to your apartment. Would you, I've downloaded the app, but where is it available for anyone who does want to download it? And kind of walk us through the steps of what it's like to use it at an event or just on the go.
Yeah. So it's available on both app stores, Apple and Android. Just search for Rememorate, Rememorate, or just rememorate.com. It has easy links to go there. Once you download the app, it's visual contact management. So the key is the photo. The old phrase is that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if you take a photo, and it doesn't have to be of the person, because it's kind of awkward to be like, hey, Ash, can I take your photo? Because I want to remember you. That is kind of creepy and pretty awkward and weird, so I don't recommend doing that. But if you just had a really amazing conversation with someone, you hit it off, you want to continue the conversation for whatever reason, ask them to take a selfie and take a selfie with them and be like, this is great. Now I'll be able to remember you. How can I reach you? What's your email or phone number or whatever, to be able to fill that in. Or if it is a more discreet, buttoned up situation, then you can, even taking a photo of an inanimate object at the time helps to jog the memory. So it could be of your feet or the drink in your hand or the plate in front of you. Just having that visual aid is a really powerful trigger to get back to the memory of when you met someone. So we definitely recommend the photo, and we pull in GPS. If you take a photo of the business card, it scans in all the text, puts it into the appropriate fields, and even polls social media to be able to say like, oh, this is Lindsay Sterling. Okay, this is her LinkedIn, this is her Twitter, this is her profile photo, and you can actually pull that in. So you can go from a business card to a LinkedIn connection and a photo to help you remember in just a matter of seconds and a few taps.
That's awesome. I mean, if someone is working or maybe just meet someone in the grocery store, and the mask is on and they don't have a business card, what would you recommend they do in addition to maybe taking a picture of their feet or an apple? If they can't scan in the information and they really want to find this person or reconnect for barbecue when everyone doesn't have to social distance, what type of usage would you recommend in that situation?
The biggest thing is just capturing the moment. So even if it's even if the example is like Corey audio, and
my brother just popped in my head.
Then you can type in like Corey audio synthesizers into a search, and you'll eventually find that that person.
Yeah.
And so especially in the in-person stuff, if it's a Zoom session, that's easy, right? You can just take a photo of the Zoom. It has their name like right on the bottom already. So you have essentially everything there for you, and you don't have the social stigma of being like, hey, can I take your photo? You can just take a screenshot or whatever and use that. But the most important thing is just capturing the information, because as long as you have a few breadcrumbs, you can get back to the memory, you can get back to who the person is online. In terms of the automated stuff, it's driven primarily by email. So if you can ask someone for their email, put in their email, that's what triggers the social search to be like, oh, you use the same email with your LinkedIn and your Gmail and your Twitter, and then it automatically pulls all of that stuff in. So if there's one field to ask someone to get that information, that would probably be the most important one.
Perfect. Excellent. Is it free, or are there in-app purchases?
It's freemium. So we're a business. We have to make money somewhere, but we believe in mission aligned pricing. So it's free to download, free to use, fully featured. Everything is kind of unlocked and there to go. Yeah. And we based the paid tier on the psychologically significant Dunbar number. Robin Dunbar was the psychologist that studied, I mentioned that 150. So he's the psychologist that published the studies that says the average person can remember 150 faces and names at a time. And that's an average, right? There are some people that can remember thousands, are your like Bill Clintons of the world that just like walk up and introduce themselves and remember everything about everyone. And then there are others that are like, I don't remember my first cousin's name.
I don't know their names.
Yeah. Shoot. So it's an average. We base our pricing on that 150 number. So cool. if you've added 150 people, you've used our app over 150 times. We would both hope and assume that you are getting value out of the app at that point and would be willing to pay for it. But it's a very affordable amount, because at the end of the day, we're just trying to help people make the most of the interactions that they have and the people that they meet. So even our top tier is just shy of $30 for an entire year.
Oh man, I mean that's nothing. If you use it 150 times already, that's nothing. Excellent. And I'll include links to rememorate.com on my website, and guide everyone who listens to this episode to where they can download it. Now, I have the most important question of the night for you, Dan. What is your favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movie?
Ooh.
You can only choose one.
All right, so my knee-jerk answer to that would be
I'm ready.
Hercules in New York.
Would be what?
Hercules in New York.
Of course it would be. Of course you would choose that one.
But I'd have to say that that probably the most nostalgic favorite would be Red Sonja.
Wow. Okay. I haven't heard either of those options yet. Excellent. I mean, of course, I would leave it up to you to be original with 100% of the things that you do. So, all right. Okay. Now,
yeah, Hercules in New York is particularly entertaining because it has it was Arnold Schwarzenegger's first movie.
Yes, it was.
And so they had to dub over his voice for the widely consumed version because his Austrian accent was so thick that the average American couldn't understand what he was saying. But there are versions floating out there that have the original Austrian American thick Arnold Schwarzenegger accent.
You know, I was actually chatting with my brother the other day about this. I've never heard Arnold Schwarzenegger speak German, ever. And I need to do that. If I'm going to continue to ask this question, I need to hear that. All I hear is, just constantly. Still send Arnold Schwarzenegger gifts every single day. So.
Fantastic.
Dan, thank you so much. Dan, thank you again. It is always great to connect with old friends, and you're living the dream so many of us have. To download Rememorate, visit rememorate.com. I will also have direct links on my resources page at ashleysterling.com/resources, where you can download it for both Android and Apple. If you're able to, follow Dan on all social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. He is always up to something unique. He is always networking. And again, he is just someone who is a perfect example as to why this podcast exists. So thank you again, Dan, and thank you for listening. And remember, you're a champion.
For more resources, head to ashleysterling.com and subscribe to Gusto with Ashley Sterling wherever you listen to podcasts.